Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We start the papers now for the June exam, and this is the first upload for 2022. And I hope this is going to be helpful for all of you. And please, all my best wishes with you all when taking the exams. As you all know that this is the paper 5090, and this is the O-level syllabus which we follow mostly here in Pakistan. And we are going to be doing the June 21. It's 1 hour 45 minutes. And this is the paper which is going to be a little difficult, so please everybody concentrate on how you're going to handle this paper. Now as we look at the first question, the section A is all compulsory and you have to answer all the questions, so there are no choices here and you write your answers in the spaces provided. The diagram shows a root hair cell. Look at it very carefully, root hair cell, and they've underlined it, and from a lemon tree and some soil particles. So we've got the air spaces and we've got the soil particles, which you can see very clearly. State one feature visible in the diagram which shows that a root hair cell is a plant cell. Now that means you've only got to come up things which are only present in plant cells. So that could only be the cell wall, or you can say the large central vacuole. So there is a very large, you can see this large central vacuole which is not found in any other, it's not found in animal cells. So this is the large central vacuole, you could say that, or you could say the large central vacuole. That's very typical of a plant cell. So this is all what you could have said. So either you said cell wall or you said a large central vacuole. Now as we read along the question, describe how mineral ions pass from the soil into the root hair cell. So if you're talking of mineral ions like nitrate ions, now how do they pass from here to here? So they're talking about the nitrate ions, phosphate ions, magnesium ions. All these are needed by the plant. So describe how mineral ions pass from the soil, read it carefully, from the soil into the root hair cell. So you have to be really clearly identifying how this is going to happen. Now, before I can read the rest of the question, I want you to understand this, is that this is a drawing of the root hair cell and this is the cell wall and the yellow is the cell membrane. So inside the cell membrane you have these channel proteins, and these are called carriers or channel proteins, and these are actually special pathways through which, because ions cannot pass through the cell membrane. Cell membrane does not allow polar molecules or ions to pass through. So you have special channel proteins through which these nitrate ions are going to pass, and you can see how I'm showing this to you in a diagram. And there's another thing which is very important, what I'm showing you in the diagram, is that they're moving from a low concentration to a high concentration. So this has to be active transport. And for active transport, you must realize that there must be some sort of energy available. So that is why you will find a large number of mitochondria present here. And so the mitochondria are going to ensure that there is going to be aerobic respiration, and respiration is going to release energy. If you watched my previous videos, I've always talked about this is respiration, R-E, respiration, release of energy. So this is how it is going to be important for you to be able to explain in the next part of the question how nitrate ions or any ions, it can be magnesium ions as well. So magnesium ions will also enter and phosphate ions will also enter. So we've got a lot of ions which the plant needs, because phosphate it needs to make its DNA, magnesium it needs to make chlorophyll molecule. So all these ions have to come from the soil, and from the soil they have to enter the root hair cell. So coming back to the question, describe how mineral ions pass from the soil into the root hair cell. So number one, dissolved in water through the cell wall. Cell wall is fully permeable, but the cell membrane is partially permeable. So then we have carriers in the membrane through the partially permeable cell membrane, and this is by active transport using energy from respiration. So you have a lot of number of points, but of course you only had to give me 4, because it's only a 4-mark question. So any 4 of these in any sequence and you would get your 4 out of 4. Then coming on to the B part of the question, the lemon tree has grown in the same soil for many years, so the soil now lacks magnesium. Describe and explain the effect on the lemon tree of a lack of magnesium. Now you can see the answer to this was very easy, because if you don't have any magnesium, there is going to be, or there's less magnesium, so less chlorophyll. Less chlorophyll means less light absorbed. Less light absorbed means less glucose made, less starch made, less photosynthesis. And so there's going to be less growth, because if it doesn't have enough starch, then it's going to be converted to glucose. Glucose has to be respired, energy released. So if that is not going to happen, then of course you realize there's going to be less crop yield. So that was a typical question which they ask you considering magnesium and chlorophyll. So it's something which is in the syllabus and everybody must be knowing that. Now as we look at question number 2, a person visits an eye doctor to have an eye test. On the wall of the doctor's room is a diagram of an eye. You have it all labeled here. Please look at the diagram carefully. There's X, there's a layer Y, there's a choroid layer which contains melanin in its cells. This is the optic nerve. Of course, that's not labeled. Name the part labeled X, lens. There's only one mark for that. There's no other point you could have written for that. Describe one way in which the structure of X is related to its function. Now, there are two possible answers. Either you wrote that it is transparent, and so it allows light to pass through. Or you wrote it's flexible and is able to focus, is able to change shape and focus the objects. So either of these, you could have written this, or you could have written the fact that it's flexible and is able to change shape, so focuses objects onto the fovea. Then it says name layer Y, and that layer Y is the retina. Could be anything else, because as you can see here, the Y is the innermost layer, and this innermost layer which you see here and there, you see the fovea is here. So this is the fovea here, which was a little dip that you saw here. So that is the fovea which you see here, the dip here. This is the fovea. So name layer Y retina. And then we go ahead and we see the B part of the question. As part of the eye test, the doctor shines a bright light into the eye and takes a picture. The picture shows the layer Y, which is the retina, and the choroid layer just beneath it. So there's the blood vessels in the choroid layer, there's the blind spot, and there's the Z part. So then it's supposed to name structure Z. Now name structure Z is nothing but the fovea. Then we come on to layer Y does not contain blood vessels. Explain how the blood vessels in the choroid layer are important to the layer Y. Now you have to be understanding that we are talking about how layer Y does not have any blood vessels, but the underlying layer, which is the choroid layer, does have blood vessels. So basically they're asking you the functions of the blood vessels. So the blood vessels anywhere in the body bring glucose, amino acids, and they bring minerals, and they bring vitamins. And why do we need the glucose? We need the glucose for aerobic respiration to release energy. So for the energy, for brings oxygen, for aerobic respiration, and it's also going to take away the carbon dioxide, which is a metabolic waste. And of course, all this is going to move in by the process of diffusion. And of course, the only blood vessel which is going to allow oxygen and carbon dioxide to pass in and out are the capillaries. So you're going to give me in the right context, you're going to talk about the capillaries, how the capillaries are one cell thick and allows the oxygen and carbon dioxide to diffuse in and out. Also, the blood is going to bring white blood cells. If God forbid somebody has an eye infection, then the white blood cells are going to, the phagocytes are going to move out of the blood and is going to fight the infection or the invading pathogens, and is going to engulf, digest, and destroy them. The next we come on to part C of the question. When the bright light is shone into the eye, there is a pupil reflex which causes the pupil to become smaller. Well, that's again about something in the syllabus, the pupil reflex. You've got to know it. I talk a lot about it when I'm teaching it to you. So explain how named parts of the eye and of the nervous system are involved in this pupil reflex. And look at the marks, it's 4 marks. So please be careful in how you word your answer, and you must all get your 4 out of 4. Now, as you look at the mark scheme is very clear. Retina detects light intensity, impulse goes to the central nervous system, while the optic nerve, and of course it's the sensory neuron which is carrying the impulses. And then of course the brain then comes out a motor neuron which comes back to the muscles of the iris, and the circle muscles of the iris contract, radial muscles of the iris relax, and the iris becomes bigger. Now please look at it. This is the iris which I've drawn here in red. So this is the iris here which I've shown you here. So the iris becomes bigger. You can see the iris is bigger here, and here the iris is smaller here. Why? Because this is in dim light. This is in dim light while this is in bright light. This one is in bright light. So iris becomes bigger and not the pupil. Why are we not giving you a mark for the pupil? Because it's given here in the question. In the pupil reflex, it causes the pupil to become smaller. So if there's something given in the question, well, we are not going to give you any marks for that. If you just write the question again, information from the question is not going to get you any marks. Then coming to the D part of the question, some people inherit a condition which prevents the production of the dark pigment melanin in their choroid and skin cells. The gene involved has two alleles, A dominant and small a recessive. Only people with two recessive alleles, so people who are small a will have the disease, will have the condition. Now, two people each with a heterozygous, so heterozygous means they are big A, small a, have children together. Complete the genetic diagram to show the possible genotypes and phenotypes of the children. Now you can see the answer was very simple. The genotype of the parent. Genotype is always the letters which we use, and because they have said in the question is capital A, small a, so you have to use these letters. You can't use something else of your own making. So capital A, small a, capital A, small a, this would be now the parental genotype. Now this is the line for gametes. Gametes is all you have to do is just write it separately. This write separately, this write separately, whatever it is. I'm not saying it's always going to be big A, small a, could be big A, big A. And you just write them in circles, and that's the line for the gametes, and you get a mark for that. You get a mark for the entire line. And then of course you combine them, and as I've shown it to you by the different colors that I've used, however I've done that. So if you are in a problem of doing this, I give you a simple way of doing it. It's 1 3, 1 4, 2 3, and 2 4. So this is how you make the crosses. Just please pause the video here, have a look at it. I've given it different colors to make you all understand how I have got this right. So the first one was big A, then big A, small a, and then big A, small a, and then the last one is small a, small a. Then phenotypes means the physical features. Will they be brown eyes? That's a physical feature. Will they have this blood group? That's a physical feature. Genotype is always written with letters. So melanin produced, but not produced here in this case because it was in the question that they will have this condition which does not produce any melanin. Then they've asked you the probability. State the probability of these two people having a child. So it's only 1 in 4. And that's a 25%. You see, this is 1, 2, so 25, 25, 50, 75, and 100. So out of 100, you have a 25% chance of having a child with this disease. 25%. So if they have 100 children, 25 would be having, it's a very large, it only is in very large numbers. If they have 4 children, well, that's a very small number. That's again a syllabus point of yours. That if they have 4 children, well, then it doesn't stand true, this probability. It will only be in larger numbers. If this couple has 100 children, then 25 will probably be sufferers of this disease. So please understand that that's a syllabus point you need to understand. You need to look at my videos on this chapter on inheritance. Now, coming to question number 3, a sycamore tree is a producer for many food chains in a forest ecosystem. Explain what is meant by a producer. A producer is a photosynthetic organism or is an autotroph. A food chain is a flow of energy. It just shows a flow of energy from one organism to the other. The diagram shows a pyramid of numbers and a pyramid of biomass for a sycamore tree. Pyramid of numbers, and it's all been labeled for you so you can all see that. But then they have asked you a very technically difficult question. Explain the different shapes of the two pyramids. Now, when you explain to them, you have to understand that you're not giving me, you're giving me the definitions of this actually. So large, if you're talking about the biomass pyramid, then large mass, so this is the large rectangle here. So this is the large rectangle here, large mass, so long rectangle. Then biomass declines. As you see, this becomes less, less, less. So biomass declines as trophic levels increase. Then if you were talking about the numbers, then only one tree, so short rectangle. Now this is the one which I'm talking about. This is the one tree, so one short rectangle. But for both of them, you could have written after the producer, both pyramid in shape. So after the producer, both are pyramid in shape. This one also after the producer is pyramid in shape. This is also pyramid in shape, and this is also pyramid in shape. So if you just leave out the producer, then they're both pyramids in shape. Another thing is energy is lost to the environment. Why? Because it's lost as heat as well. I mean, when we are sitting, we are losing heat all the time. We are at 37, we are losing heat. And actually, the heat is being generated by the process of respiration, which releases energy. And then you come to the next part of the question. It says sycamore trees produce flowers that are insect pollinated. Suggest two features of flowers which adapt them for insect pollination. So that's very easy. Large petals, they have nectaries, they have scent, they have anthers which are inside, and the pollen is rough or sticky so that it sticks to the insect. And then it says the last part of the question was again 1 mark is state the type of cell division that produces pollen grains, and that is only and only there is only one answer to that, and that is meiosis. Please get your spelling right. Do not write it in any other spelling because this is where we will check you for the spellings. Now, coming on to question number 4, the diagram shows part of the human alimentary canal and its associated organs. Complete the 3 labels on the diagram by naming the structures. So, you know, this was the esophagus, and this is the gallbladder, and this is the first part of the small intestine, and that is the duodenum. But you could have also said small intestine, and for the esophagus, you could have also said gullet, and that was correct. We didn't cut a mark for that. Now it says describe the functions of the structure labeled F. Now, as you know, all know the structure labeled F is the stomach, but there is no mark for that. But you have to give me the function of the structure labeled F. So this is for the B part of this, and then of course you see that's only for 3 marks. And then it names structure H and describe its role in homeostasis. Now, what is H? H is the pancreas, F is the stomach, so it says describe structure H and describe its role in homeostasis. So that is a pretty simple question, and I'm sure you all could figure it out. Now describe the functions of the structure labeled F, and F was the stomach, so it's basically digestion of proteins, then muscle contractions to make the food particles smaller, then the enzyme pepsin release, then the HCl providing the optimum pH, then the HCl destroying pathogens, disease causing microorganisms, and the mucus being produced which protects the lining of the stomach. So this was all the function, but there were no marks for if you said it was a stomach or anything, there was no mark for that because it didn't ask you that. It said describe the functions of the structure labeled F. Then it says name structure H and describe its role in homeostasis. Now you all know that is the pancreas. So the pancreas would be, the name would be of course correct, Pancreas. And what does it do? It controls your blood glucose level. So basically it was very simple, controls your blood glucose concentration, producing insulin, because we're talking about that in the context of homeostasis. So controls blood glucose concentration, or you could say the level. Or you could have also said produces insulin. So produces insulin, or if you could even say glucagon, I'm sure you could get a mark for that as well. Question 5. A farmer is using a tool called a matlock to weed her crop. Explain how the muscles and bones in her right arm help her to lift the tool. So basically, you're going to talk about the bones. So you could have talked about the bones is the humerus, which is at the upper arm, is attached to the radius and ulna in the lower arm. And then you would talk about the antagonistic muscles, and then you would talk about the biceps contracting, and of course the radius and the ulna is moved towards the humerus, so you bend your arm at the elbow, and then the triceps relaxes, and the fact that the elbow is a hinge joint. So any of those points, and you could have given them to me in any sequence, because you have to get your 4 marks. So you had, in order to get your 4 marks, you would give me all this information, and this would get you your 4 out of 4. So simple antagonistic muscles, biceps contracts, triceps relax, elbow is a hinge joint, radius and ulna move towards the humerus, and the humerus is in the upper arm and the radius and ulna in the lower arm. You had to talk about the bones, so you'd have to give me the position of the bones and where were they located, which bone was in the upper arm and which bone was in the lower arm. So that is why the information I'm giving you all that. Then coming to the B part of the question, the farmer has not used any insecticide or artificial fertilizer on the crop. Explain ways in which this may help the local environment. So of course there's going to be no water pollution. So no water pollution is the very important component of when you use insecticides and artificial fertilizers that results in eutrophication. And that is basically going to be all water pollution. So no water pollution. Another important thing which will, of course, be very helpful for the environment will be there'll be no bioaccumulation. Now, what is bioaccumulation? Bioaccumulation is, when the insecticides are sprayed onto crops to kill the insects, then all this chemical is washed into ponds and lakes, and that is, of course, in very, very dilute proportions. But as it enters the food chain, it increases as it goes along the food chain, and that is called bioaccumulation. Now, whenever any nitrates or fertilizer are washed into lakes, that results in the growth of algae. Now, that is called the algal bloom. So, if there is going to be no fertilizer washed into lakes and ponds, then there's going to be no algal bloom. And when the algal bloom occurs, then this algae falls to the bottom of the pond. That results in bacteria increasing in numbers, and they use up the oxygen of the water. So there is going to be lack of oxygen, but because there's no such thing going to happen, so there's not going to be a lack of oxygen. And then if you didn't spray any insecticide, then the insect will still be there and the insects can eat the pests. So they'll still function. And of course, this results in increase in biodiversity because we have insects and then we have certain plants also because we have not sprayed them with insecticides. So we still have those, and this increases the biodiversity. So insects will not be destroyed. So there'll still be pollinators around. And if they're pollinators, they will pollinate different crops, and that will result in different fruits being still being available. So greater variety of food source for consumers. So that is the few points on which you could have given me any 4 points, and you would have got your 4 out of 4. As you can see here, the explanation for bioaccumulation, DDT and PCB are chemicals that can be eaten or absorbed. Organisms slowly build up these chemicals in their bodies, and this is called bioaccumulation. As we follow food chain from the producer up to the highest consumer, the pollutants become magnified or more concentrated, and this is called biomagnification. And this is measured in parts per million. At even low levels, 5 parts per million DDT in animals can cause nervous, immune, and reproductive disorders. So bioaccumulation and biomagnification. What is bioaccumulation? Bioaccumulation is the buildup of biological substance in organism. This can happen at any trophic level. In farming, some pesticides are not biodegradable, so are unable to be broken down by microbes in the soil. The pesticides build up in soil, water, and organisms. So this is just an explanation of bioaccumulation so that you know what we're going to be talking about, and this would come in any other paper as well. That finishes this paper. We're going to do the section B and the C in another video. So best of luck, and please do subscribe and do let me know if there anything you would like me to specifically talk about in the next videos. And thank you once again. Thank you very much.